Let's read an article or two about Vikings and white supremacy. So this is from Time, and I'm going to read some other articles, but this is by Dorothy Kim. And the title of the article is White Supremacists Have Weaponized an imaginary Viking past. It's time to reclaim the real history. Now, before I continue, I did post the it was a while back. I'll probably repost it. There was a guy from Scandinavia, and he's actually Scandinavian, and he took umbrage with this whole white supremacist, culturally appropriating or hijacking, Viking or Norse mythology in order to come up with this what would you call it? Come up with this fantasy ideal of white male masculinity, and then trying to apply it in modern times, with all this racial stuff going on, which in my opinion, it comes down to, white people's low birth rates and these Democrat societies, they'll get outvoted, the economy being trash, and white men can't get their lives started, the cost of living, everything else like that, right? And they have this strong sense of entitlement. And so when they feel like the walls are closing on them, they start freaking out, and then they start grabbing towards anything that's going to give them what they believe to be some sort of positive male identity, right? Some positive white male masculine identity. And again, especially in the face of feminism, LGBT, gender fluidity, all this stuff. That's why I hate the fact that, black people's struggle and plight, and I take umbrage, I love that word, I take issue, with black women on this front, because they were some of the main ones that, tried to form Voltron with the LGBT, and then, came and twisted it and, smashed the patriarchy and all this. Again, I told you, the feminists and the LGBT community, they formed Voltron because their ultimate goal is to smash patriarchy. The gay people want to be accepted and equalized to heteronormative cisgender people. And then the feminist women, they want to be able to basically play the role of a male, but yet still be valued as a female. So because patriarchy is not going to give them that, they're like, smash the patriarchy, tear it all down. So everybody's got their issue, and they're trying to steer society in a particular direction because, they either want to tear something down, right, which are typically the smaller minority groups, or when it comes to the white people, they feel like they're losing something, right, which even further reinforces the concept of white supremacy, because only the white people essentially have that fear of loss. Everybody else is trying to steer the society in a different direction. But only white people have the fear of loss, the fear of losing, the power and position as the dominant culture that gets to define everything, for everybody. Now, personally, I think certain things are just universal. I don't put patriarchy in some sort of, it's in the white box and it's a Eurocentric concept. I think that's bullshit. Again, patriarchies challenge other patriarchies, and patriarchies crush other patriarchies. But at the end of the day, again, and the reason why it's patriarchy crushing other patriarchies is because, men recognize other men as a threat. Once you take out the men, or once you undermine the men through their women or through their children, or you destroy the means of production for that group of men, you've essentially toppled their patriarchy. And then you can come in with your patriarchy and basically dominate everything, which is essentially what white supremacy has done. But anyway, continuing, and this has a picture of, I don't know if they're chess pieces, Norse chessmen. Yeah, see, I guessed it right. Chessmen from a Viking board, Isle of Lewis, Scotland. Now, if you don't know, the Vikings invaded northern, what would you call that? The northern British Isles, and mingled with the people who were there, and then all that back and forth, William Wallace and Scotland and Ireland and the mainland, of what would you call that, Britannia? I don't know. I gotta pop up a couple YouTube videos, and I'm sure I'll get all the information I want about Vikings invading the UK, and how English is a Germanic language and all that, right? So there's a complex history there. I'm not going to get into all that because, I'd have to watch like 5 YouTube videos and then I'll become an expert on, that shit. But anyway, this was written April 12th, 2019. It says, after New Zealand passed new gun laws this week, most automatic and semi-automatic weapons have been outlawed. As of Friday, a swift response to March 15th shooting of the Christian church that left 50 Muslim men, women, and children dead at the hands of an alleged white supremacist terrorist. But guns weren't the only weapon used by the shooter. The shootings followed the release of materials some have called a manifesto, but that has more accurately been called a media plan. In it are multiple medieval references, several involving medieval Vikings, which these days function as a signal to white supremacists. Along with much else from the European medieval world, a Viking past is part of the far-right standard visual textual imagery, right? And this is so, I like how the brothers are turning it around, because, the white supremacists, they come over, with all their bullshit and confirmation bias, and they love to troll in the comments. We was Kangs, K-A-N-G, we was Kangs. And the black men have cleverly responded back, we were Vikings, V-I-K-A-N-G-S, Vikings. This shit is hilarious. I'll probably title this video that, we were Vikings. So again, it's just, to me, it signals just how much today's modern society has emasculated not just black men, who are the canaries in the coal mine, but also have emasculated, white men. So it's like everybody wants to go back to, ancient times. They want to go back to an era where society is much simpler. Where they feel that they actually have a role. Women were doing domestic things and raising children, and men were doing the whole hunter-gatherer thing, or, battling other groups of patriarchs, right? Territorial disputes, land grabs, raping and pillaging, right? So, continuing, where was I at? Viking Pass is part of the far-right standard visual and textual imagery. That vision of a Viking world depends on contemporary digital and filmic popular culture, such as the TV show Vikings. And I haven't overlooked that, because a lot of this Viking shit came after the TV show Vikings. For some reason, that show just resonated with so many white men that they were like, yeah, we're Vikings. And then, like I told you, I started seeing more and more Vikings all over the place at the gym, just about, they shave both sides of their head, have their little man bun, and then grow their tier 1 operator beard. Viking adjacent video games. Yeah, I guess they had, what was the Viking game that they had recently? It was, what was the, I can't think of what it is. It's off the top of my head. Oh, it's what was that Viking game? The Viking game was, I can't think of what it is. Oh, I can't think of what it is. Where the dude has the wrist blade. What's that damn thing? Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. Somebody's gonna write in the comment section. I can't think of what the game is called off the top of my head. It'll come to me. The Viking show, Viking adjacent video games, as well as academic and historical sources. Okay. But the far-right Viking medievalism is not about historical accuracy. Rather, it's used to create narratives. So to resist the medieval narratives that activate violent hate, we must create counter-narratives. And to do that, we must understand the real Viking past and how it has been weaponized. The term Viking possibly comes from the Old Norse word Vikinger, I don't know, there's an R at the end of it. It's Viking, but with an R at the end. Sea warrior. As Stephen Brink and Neil Price's The Viking World describes historically, it referred to seafaring groups who traversed the seas, oceans, and rivers to raid, trade, and colonize around the 10th and 11th centuries. They established settler colonies across the Mediterranean, Caspian, Black, Arctic, and North Atlantic seas and waterways, maintaining a presence in regions ranging from present-day Russia and Europe to the Americas. Crucially, they were not homogeneous seafarers, as is often imagined. They were multicultural and multiracial, but until recently, scholarly discussions of the Vikings in relation to race and global medieval ages has been sidelined. So where does the white supremacist vision of Viking genealogy come from? Despite the fact that the real Viking history was multicultural, academic medieval studies have historically been to blame for the upholding of the imaginary past. In the 19th century, romantic German nationalism, metastasized into the Volkisch movement, which was interested in historical narratives that bolstered a white German nation state. The movement rewrote history, drawing a folklore such as that of Brothers Grimm, medieval epics, and a dedication to racial white supremacy. Late 19th and early 20th century scholars simultaneously drew from and reinforced this racialized imagination of the medieval past. Crucially, Wilhelm Gronbach, I don't know how to say that shit, multi-volume work, Vor Folkiet, I don't know, Old Tiden, translation, The Cultures of the Teutons, imagined a ancient Germanic genealogy that ran from Tacitus through the Middle Ages. I can't say these damn things. German scholarly work during the eve of the Third Reich then added to the idea, with authors like Gustav Neckel and Bernard Kummer blaming socialism, Jews, and classic revolutions for the decline of the Germanic race they saw descending from the Viking past. Another German scholar, Otto Hoffler, who based his work on the Gronbach, wrote of the Bunde, I don't know how to say that shit, which the scholar Stephanie von Schnurben has described as all male warrior associations in so-called primitive societies. Yeah, but the Vikings, they had like the Valkyrie bitches that come and bring you to the gates of Valhalla. They escort warriors to the gates of Valhalla. Anyway, his taking on Mannerbund would become used as an explanation of the past and current Germanic race and fueled the idea behind Nazi groups such as the SS and SA. After World War II, despite the defeat of the Axis powers, these ideas didn't go away. Rather, they saw a resurgence in specific circles, including various far-right neo-pagan groups like the Scandinavian Nordic Resistance Movement. What are they resisting? Resist what? Known for their neo-Nazi violence. Gronbach's multi-volume work, translated and available online, and the works of his contemporaries, has also influenced current far-right extremists in Europe and North America. This neo-pagan resurgence interests with many facets of extremism today, from eco-fascism, another term the Christchurch terrorist invoked, to groups like the Odinist, that's, the god Odin, right? The Odinist, who practice a form of white toxic masculinity based on the belief that the barbaric warriors of medieval Northern Europe functioned as a violent warrior comitatus. I don't know what that word is. What is comitatus? Let's go to, can I get the little lookup thing to pop up? Look up what is comitatus. I don't know what the fuck that is. Comitatus was in ancient times the Latin term for the armed escort retinue. I don't know. Anyway, and I hate the word toxic masculinity. It's such an overused term. It's just like, I mean, it could just be it's applied to anything that the feminists don't like, and I feel like it's such an overused term that it turns people off. Like, you need masculinity. Like, anytime a man tries to act like a man, it's toxic, right? Now, I don't agree with, the racist angle of, this sort of, quote unquote toxic masculinity, but I'm not against masculinity. You see, and they try to conflate the two, and this is why, shit gets dismissed a lot of times. Odinists follow a neo-pagan medieval Scandinavian religion that is unacknowledged by the official Icelandic pagan religion Asatru. I don't know how to say that shit. The man who is accused of attacking two teenage girls, one in a hijab, and murdering Rick Best and Taliesin Mirden Nake Meche, I don't know, in Portland, Oregon in 2017, had linked himself to the idea of Vinland, the concept of Viking North America, onto which the imaginary Odinist past has been superimposed. Nor is this use of Old Norse and Viking history limited to specific alt-right subgroups. In fact, it is generalized social fixture in these circles. For example, when researcher Patrick Hersmanson went undercover among the denizens of this world, he attended gatherings where extremists drank mead from a traditional Viking horn, prayed to the Norse god Odin. I don't know what mead is. It's probably like some ground up something. The Vikings past contributes to a medieval toolkit of language, allusion, and symbolism used to transmit white supremacist messages. Communities of color have in the past fought white supremacist medieval narratives as a grassroots by spreading their own counter-narratives, from W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, however you want to say it, creating an African-American vision of the medieval past in Dark Princess, to the Asian Americans who pushed back against racist medievalism during the period of Chinese exclusion. Scholars and historians, not just medievalists, must also interrogate their disciplines from the from the inside, setting the record straight about medieval race and global medieval ages. So far, however, the most widespread, concerted, and effective way to fight back against the historical white supremacist Viking genealogy has come not from academics or journalists. Rather, it has come from the Taki Waititi. Where's up with these crazy names? The indigenous Maori director and writer. His movie Thor Ragnarok. So Maori was he's from Southeast Asia. Interesting. He's from New Zealand. I guess he's a New Zealander. So then a New Zealander wrote Ragnarok. Really? That's interesting. The Maori people are the ones that do the Haka dance, which I love the Haka dance. I'm not gonna lie. Like, have you ever seen like the Haka dance wedding? You know what I mean? Where they were like, oh, that shit, and even the white guys get on the Haka dance, you know. So I always thought that was very interesting. They'll have whole schools in New Zealand that they all do the Haka dance. So anyway, in which Thor's hammer, a medieval item regularly brandished by extremists, is destroyed, was a multicultural and post-colonial counter-narrative to the white Viking narrative circulating through the alt-right digital ecosystem. After decades of building up the violent Viking vision, more such stories will be needed to disrupt this medieval machine. So that's the one article. Let's go back. Let's go over here. What's the other? Let's see. We should go over here. Okay, Vikings. Here's perspective. White supremacists love Vikings, but they've got the history all wrong. This is another article. This is from the Washington Post. And this is by David Perry. He says, white supremacists love Vikings, but they've got history all wrong. And he is a journalist and senior academic advisor to the history department of the University of Minnesota. And this is a picture of a woman pays a makeshift memorial in Portland, Oregon, for two men killed as they tried to stop harassment. And I think this was on the train. This is on the train in Portland. There was some crazed guy, and he stabbed both of them while they were trying to protect two Muslim girls on the train, I believe. In early May, the white supremacist Jerry Christian, who was accused of killing two men in Portland, Oregon, on Friday posted a Facebook, "Hail Vinland, hail victory." Victory makes sense. Bigots feel empowered these days. But why Vinland? Why was this accused attacker talking about the short-lived Viking settlement in North America? It turns out that the white supremacy has gone fully medieval, as the current contest over Confederate monuments exemplifies. Americans are accustomed to contested narratives about race and history, fixating on the American South. Some of the most dangerous terrorists in the U.S., though, are looking much, much farther north. Vinland was the name that a group of 10th century Vikings led by Leif Erikson gave to the grapevine-rich island of what we believe is the coast of North America. For white supremacists, the concept of Vinland asserts a historical claim over North America, stretching especially from the northeast coast to the Pacific Northwest. They use the myth of Vinland to position themselves as righteous defenders in the wars of race and religion they believe are coming. I like this writer because he actually writes a lot better than the other one, in my opinion, which is why it's easier for me to read. The colonization of Vinland was pretty much a disaster, but it did happen. There's archaeological evidence for a Viking presence in North America. Two surviving sagas recount the voyages. The sagas don't always agree when it comes to laying blame. Was an internecine violence of fighting with the indigenous people. What does internecine mean? Let's look that word up, because I don't know that word. I am not familiar with that word. Internecine. Internecine. Nasine, is that how you say it? Looks like that's how you say it. Means deadly. Deadly. Intestine. What is it? Anyway, deadly. I'll just go with deadly. It says that's the Oxford American definition. internecine violence of fighting with the indigenous people who started the fighting. The general details, however, are known. Ericsson found an island, named it Vinland, and went home with timber. Later expeditions failed, though, as few survivors made it home to tell the tale. Voyages west from Greenland soon ceased as the risk-reward calculus didn't seem favorable. So much for Vinland. And then here's Jerry Christian, the man accused of killing 2 men on Portland train. Yep, I was right about it. It was the train situation. Shouted free speech or die during his arraignment. Stories of Vikings, both in Scandinavia and North America, have long contained the potential to feed inventions of an imaginary racist past. European racists have long wanted to believe in a pure white, hermetically, I don't know that word. That's another word I don't know. Let's pull that up. Let's look up that word. In a way that is completely airtight. Oh, like hermetically sealed. Like, yeah, okay, got you. Like the damn Russian 7 and 6 ammo was hermetically sealed. It was airtight. You know, in those green cans, for your Mosin Nagant, right? So hermetically sealed Middle Ages. Today, anti-refugee protesters in Europe dress up as Vikings and Crusaders. North American hate groups invoke the Norse god Odin and Vinland. The Southern Poverty Law Center reported on the rise of Odinism. Damn, Odinism. In 2009, including the founding of Vinland folk resistance. In the Pacific Northwest, the Wolves of Vinland and the allegedly affiliated Operation Werewolf present white supremacists with a combination biker gang, weightlifting club, and militia. One individual who routinely shares Operation Werewolf social media post responded in 2012 to an article about the untrue legend of Viking colonization of Minnesota and northern Canada by writing on Facebook, "Our history is not a hoax. Hail Vinland." But even the Vikings of Europe did not exist in pure white racial isolation. The Vikings, or rather the conglomeration of Scandinavian peoples we've come to call Vikings, conquered and colonized where they found weak powers in the disorganized west of Europe. To the east, they also tapped into rich multicultural trading networks, fighting when useful, but delighted to engage in economic and cultural exchange with great powers of Eurasia. That included the Jews of Khazaria, Christians dedicated to both Rome and Constantinople, and Muslims of every sect and ethnicity. Islamic coins, in fact, have been found buried across the Viking world, a testimony of the richness of this exchange. In fact, the whole notion of pure white medieval Europe, so important to white supremacists today, is false. The fixation of skin color is largely a modern phenomenon alien to the Europe dependent on a Mediterranean world composed of people with varying shades of brown skin. It's not that medievals lacked prejudice or hate, but our hang-ups and divisions were not theirs. Medieval Europe was not isolated from the broader world, but rather participated in the global Middle Ages, that linked great Euro-Asian and African cultures through the movement of things and people, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not. One of the vectors of these connections was, of course, the very same Vikings now serving as fodder for American hate. Vinland wasn't the only medieval presence at the Portland murders. Taliesin, Myrdine, Namki, Meche died fighting to protect the vulnerable people targeted by hate. Myrdine is the Welsh name for Merlin, the great wizard in the court of King Arthur. Taliesin was a 6th century Welsh poet who was later folded into the Arthurian legends. Their namesake died defending the vulnerable. His last words were like a chivalric hero to tell the people of the train that he loved them all. History was never just seen. History has never just been the past. As a historian, I study the way that groups have always tried to assert control over their stories, seeking to mold legend, myth, and reality into a useful narrative about identity and destiny. Stories like this have power, and we'd be foolish to ignore the threat. As we mourn the martyrs in Portland, care for the wounded, and support the women who were initially targeted, we shouldn't ignore the danger, the racist appropriation of medieval past presence. American white supremacists want to make Vinland great again, laying out an imagined past in which Vikings are the rightful conquerors of North America, locked in eternal battle with the Skrellings, the Viking slur for indigenous people. We must inoculate ourselves against this hate by telling a better story, one that recognizes the many errors of our past, but also lays out a vision for a more inclusive future. So that was that piece. Okay, let's look at another piece. White supremacists are misappropriating Norse mythology. Ooh, let's look at this one. This is University of Alberta. This is from Canada. Scandinavian Studies professor Natalie van Dusen says historical records and DNA evidence show that the age of Nordic and racial purity touted by white supremacist groups never existed. White supremacists are misappropriating Norse mythology, says expert. Scandinavian Studies professor debunks idea of racial purity that makes racist extremist identity with Viking culture. That makes racist extremist identity. That word shouldn't it be mixes? Anyway, this was written in 2020, July 30th by Geoff McMaster. There is an urgent and pressing need for everyone to understand the Vikings, argues Scandinavian Studies scholar Natalie van Dusen. That's because all manner of Viking symbols and misconceptions about a golden age of Nordic racial purity have been appropriated by the extremists looking to justify their xenophobia and acts of violence, according to University of Alberta researcher. Van Dusen said the age of racial purity never existed, and she is determined to debunk the corrosive myth at every turn, especially in the classroom. Viking symbols are everywhere among the ultra-right. When the Unite the Right rally took place in Charlottesville in 2017, some protesters carried banners featuring the Norse god Thor's hammer, popular among the Nazis and neo-Nazi groups. The perpetrator of New Zealand's Christian church massacre last year wrote, "See you in Valhalla." See, I wasn't making that shit up when I made that video yesterday. You know, witness me, bag, witness. See you in Valhalla, right? Shiny in chrome, referring to the great hall where heroes of Norse mythology go after they die at the end of his manifesto. Now, Valhalla is where warriors go to die. So they have to die in battle in order to get to Valhalla, and the Valkyries escort their soul to Valhalla. Anyway, closer to home, the soldiers of Odin and Finnish white supremacist movement named after another Norse god in 2015 have recently emerged in Alberta and throughout Canada. The precedent was set with the Nazis, said von Dusen. National Socialism and Hitler idealized the Norse people, those who lived in Nordic areas. Even the swastika is based in part on a symbol based on Viking artifacts. That is incorrect. The swastika is based on a Hindu symbol. It's a Hindu symbol that was basically, vertical and horizontal, and then they tilted the symbol. You can go and look it up. The swastika is a 2,000-year-old symbol. So that is not correct. A popular text among the Nazis was Germania by the Roman historian Tacitus. Here we go with that Tacitus again, who described Germanic peoples as pure or uncorrupted. It laid the groundwork for the Nazis to, what is this? Harken back to, said von Dusen. Many current white supremacist movements are similarly motivated by their belief in white medieval past and pure ancestral race they perceive as under threat in the face of immigration and religious and racial diversity, wrote von Dusen in an article for the Canadian Historical Association. The Viking Age of the Norse mythology are of particular interest in these groups, who have committed acts of violence against perceived outsiders such as Jews, Muslims, and people of color. However, she's quick to point out that not every neo-pagan group that adopts Nordic mythology is racist. There are also neo-pagans who are inclusive and don't see it as a sort of an ethnic religion that you could only participate in if you are of Germanic descent. In her popular courses of religion and culture of the Viking Age and Nordic Middle Ages, von Dusen is careful to highlight the flourishing ethnic and cultural exchange among Nordic people of the time, mainly the late 8th and early 11th centuries, including their relationships with the Sami indigenous peoples of northern Scandinavia. So I'm assuming that they're like the Inuit people, the people that like hunt seals, the Eskimos type people, that live in the Arctic Circle. I strive to teach in a way that doesn't solely focus on Norse-speaking peoples, who were by no means the only ones to occupy the Nordic region during this period. Nor were they without influence from surrounding cultures, he said. Compelling evidence. Compelling evidence is, and that's the title of this section. The most compelling evidence refuting racial purity is DNA analysis of skeletal remains from the Viking Age, which reveals a high degree of ethnic exchange. The extent to which people married and also took slaves or concubines from different places they went indicates it wasn't a pure Germanic monoculture, said von Dusen. The Vikings traveled to what is now Newfoundland, she said, trading with people who were probably the ancestors of the Inuit. Didn't I just say that? They also traveled to Islamic Spain and to Baghdad and Constantinople. They were pretty much everywhere, and they had peaceful relations and non-peaceful relations. Von Dusen currently had an Iranian teaching assistant, Sanjad Soleimani, the Yazidi. The Iranians always have that Mani part in their name. I don't know why, but it's very common. If you hear Mani in their name, they're usually Iranian. Translating passages of Persian poetry in English that describe encounters with Vikings. It's been a really cool way of showing perceptions of Vikings from the Middle East and what those encounters were like. She also points to the influential article by University of Liverpool scholar Claire Downham, who shows how the mobility of the Vikings around the world, with the trade routes extending from Canada to Afghanistan, led to a fusion of cultures. Damn, I guess these people really got around. A striking feature of the early Viking success was their ability to embrace and adapt from a wide range of cultures, whether that be Christian, Irish, in the West, or the Muslims of the Abbasid Caliphate in the East. Writers Downham. Von Dusen said she's grateful that most of the students who take her classes do so out of genuine interest, not because they're looking to shore up some racist ideology. Some of her American colleagues, haven't been so lucky, especially in places where racism is more overt. Some professors have students tattooed with really problematic symbols carrying connotations of white supremacy, looking for confirmation of misconceptions they already have, she said. I think it's a really important thing to do, to be talking about this stuff and actively show the ideologies promoted by these movements are not consistent with what we have as historical evidence. So that's another article. What article is this? I took a screenshot of one of the quotes in this thing. It says, the medieval imaginary traffics in the same posturing masculinity that characterizes so much of the far right. And then what's this next article? Viking Crusaders, Confederates misunderstand historical imagery at the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Okay, let's look at this article. This is historians.org. If it would load up and not just take forever. Okay, you don't want to open up. Okay, here we go. Viking Crusaders, Confederates, current events in historical context, perspectives daily, misunderstand historical imagery at the January 6th Capitol insurrection. This was written January 12th, 2021. A little over 2 years ago, I wrote for Perspectives about the 2017 white supremacist riot in Charlottesville, Virginia, the far right's appropriation of the European Middle Ages and how conservations between medievalist and Americanist could help us better understand the moment, the elision of crusade. I gotta look that word up. I don't know that word. The omission of a sound or syllable when speaking. Elision. I don't know how to say it. Crusade and Confederacy, Templar shields and pseudo-medieval armor next to secessionist battle flag and statue of Robert E. Lee might have seemed like an odd juxtaposition at the time, but it made sense as a kind of double nostalgia. The through line was a militant masculinity and religiosity, a glorification of lost causes in which white men fought off supposed barbarians, be they black Americans or Muslims. A representative poster from January 6th featuring mishmash of Donald Trump, the film 1995 Braveheart, and anti-communism. So it's a picture of, it says Braveheart on it, and it's got Donald Trump, and he's holding the decapitated head of Karl Marx, and he's screaming, and it's in like old English print, freedom, right? Which is what he said at the end of the movie when, right before when he was getting executed, when he was getting quartered. Those themes have not abated in the intervening years. If anything, they've only intensified. And so here we are in the January 2021, in the wake of another right-wing riot, this time a direct attack on the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. The connection between Charlottesville and the insurrection at the Capitol, even across the 4 years in between, are clear. So, too, are the similarities in imagery seen in the crowd, a mixture of fascist authoritarianism, nostalgia for the Confederacy, and medievalism. This medieval imagery traffics in the same posturing masculinity that characterizes so much of the far right. The first two might make the most sense to the casual observer, since this was a pro-Trump rally to try to overturn an election supporting a leader who has gone out of his way to defend Confederate statues and military bases named after secessionists. But that last category of imagery, appearing to invoke the European Middle Ages, but really a mashup of pop culture and anti-Semitism, makes a lot of sense as well. The imagery, of course, still traffics in the same posturing masculinity that characterizes so much of the far right. In addition, the far right often plays with the common conception of the Dark Ages, the sense that it can be anything because many think we know so little about the period, to instill their own version of the past upon it. And you know what's funny? I say the same thing about the Hoteps and ancient Africa, and even some of like the black female matriarchs and gynocentric women who try to they're so since the black community technically is supposed to be anti-white supremacy, all they got to do is label something as Eurocentric, and as a black American, you're supposed to be anti that because, it's Eurocentric and it's not our culture, it's somebody else's culture. And then they just start making shit up about Africa so that they can, facilitate matriarchy. We led black men into battle while riding, a white rhinoceros. They kind of push that sort of idea. Ancient Africa, we were matrilineal, or women, had positions of power. Queen of Zinga, Queen of Sheba, Cleopatra. They start throwing all that stuff up to try to paint it as, just making things up and adding it in it because, this is our true African history, which it's not. But then, if you don't co-sign it, then I guess you support Eurocentricity and you're nothing more than a Negropian, so it's real slick. And I'm just saying there's parallels between what is being said about what the white supremacists do and the Nordic past that they just try to make up, and some of the Afrocentrists that try to just make up shit, or even the black feminists that'll try to just make up stuff about Africa to try to shame or convince a black man into believing that his patriarchal orientation is the West is not his natural African state of being, or some black state of being, right? So where was I at? Okay, to do this, they focus on a discrete, actual historical moments, and use pop culture in combination with outdated historiography. I've never heard that. Historiography. Most often, those focal points revolve around the Vikings and the so-called Crusades. Vikings, next part. One of the most photographed seditionists from this past week was Jacob Chansley, a.k.a. Jake Angeli. I don't know who that is. Angeli. The self-professed Q shaman. Oh, that's that guy. The guy in the Capitol with the horns on his head, even though Vikings didn't have horns like that. A failed actor and devotee of the Q conspiracy. He showed up shirtless, covered with tattoos, and wearing a horned headdress. He participated in the storming of the Capitol and had his picture taken inside the Senate chamber on the dais. I don't know what the dais is. I'm sure it's like some sort of podium or something like that. The outfit is, to say the least, confused. There are appropriations of Native American dress, but mixed with Viking allusions. The horned helmet, but more importantly, tattoos that have long been associated with hate groups, specifically the Tree of Yggdrasil, Thor's hammer, how do you say that? MJOL, Majorn, I can't even say that shit. How do you have an M and a J and an O and an L and an N and an I and an R? Majorn. How the fuck would you say that shit? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got two vowels in there. Anyway, Thor's hammer and interlocking triangles called the vowel knot. But as Dorothy Kim has written, also she's referencing that first article that I wrote or that I read. The point here isn't historical accuracy. The bridge between 9th century raiders and modern racists was built in the 19th century in mainstream scholarship that sought a pure, romantic, hypermasculine ancestry from a nascent. I always see that word and I don't know what it means. Let's look it up. Nascent, just the beginning. Is that how you say that word? I don't know how to say that word. Nascent? I don't know. German nation. This was the picked up by racist scientists on both sides of the Atlantic. In the U.S., early 20th century racists such as Madison Grant and Lothrop Stoddard held up the Nordic race as the apex of all civilizations. Unsurprisingly, these American developments were heartily endorsed by the Nazis, using explicit imagery such as Norse runes for their military uniforms. You know what's so funny? Like, where are the megalithic structures in Scandinavia and Northern Europe? Right? The whole irony of it all is it's the dark white people that actually have all of the megalithic structures and interesting stuff. You know, the what do you want to call it? Stonehenge is not impressive to me. The Parthenon is far more impressive to me. You know, or what was the thing? The stone of the pregnant woman is far more impressive to me. Or the Colosseum is far more impressive than Stonehenge. You know, but I'm just saying, it's funny how the further south you go, the closer you get to Africa, that's where you have all these megalithic structures. So technically speaking, it's the dark white people who were the apex of civilization, the Greeks and the Romans, and not the Nordic white people, you know, who were up there with the polar bears and furs and stuff like that. I don't know where this idea of Nordic superiority comes from when they have no evidence. They have no megalithic structures. You have to go south. You have to go to southern Europe to see the megalithic structures, and you say, God damn, how'd they move those stones? So like the whole thought process of the apex of all civilizations, it so flies in the face of what we know about, you know, megalithic structures and monuments and math and all that stuff about, you know, the precision of not just, you know, ancient Egypt, but also of Greece and Rome. I'm like, where is that type of precision in Nordic anything? Anyway, continuing. Their history is a mishmash of tropes telescoping different historical moments as the point for the far right isn't historical accuracy. The lineage continues directly into the 21st century. In the last few decades, however, this older race science has at times melded with the pseudo New Age neo-paganism. You know, for example, and this is the type of shit that you see in Ukraine right now, with the Azov battalion, I think that's what it's called. For example, the white supremacist terrorist who killed 2 Portland, Oregon. See, they're referencing this again. Hail Vinland to Facebook before his attack. Vinland refers to the short-lived Norse settlements in North America in the 10th and 11th centuries, but white supremacist innovations of the term bring us back to the significance of the Q shaman. What the white supremacists are doing telescopes history and creates what Daniel Christmas has called heritage politics, attempting to stand the actual Vikings next to 1900 race, circa 1900 race science, next to the Nazis, next to Trump, suggesting a simple and unbroken connection between them all, and thereby trying to draw legitimacy from the past. You know, that's actually a very well written, very well stated way of putting it, right? Daniel Christmas has called heritage politics, attempting to stand the actual Vikings next to circa 1900 race science, next to the Nazis, next to Trump, suggesting a simple and unbroken connection between them all, and thereby trying to draw legitimacy from the past. And then the next section, Crusades. A similar process is at play related to the right's use of medieval Christian holy war iconography. the so-called Crusades flags, supposedly representing the 12th century military religious order, Knights of the Templar, were spotted at the Capitol insurrection, and imagery, and they got a picture of it, and yeah, it's the Knights Templar flag. Imagery of the Knights, which crosses emblazoned upon their chest or their shields, have been a staple of the far right internet and protest cultural, predating the 2017 Charlottesville riot. You know what's interesting about the Knights Templar? If you look into the Knights Templar and the almost like in Star Wars they had the Order 666, where the Jedi were betrayed by the Jedi, or by the Senator Palpatine, and all of the clones turned on the Jedi and they were basically wiped out. That is actually drawn from the king, I think it was King Philip of France, who turned on the Knights Templar because they were running banking houses all through Europe, and they lent him money, and he basically wanted to clear the books, so he freaking betrayed them, called them all back to France, and then did a Order 666 thing that you have in the Star Wars, what was that, Phantom Menace, I think it was. And no, it wasn't Phantom Menace. Which one was it? Was it Phantom Menace? Which Star Wars was it? Was it episode 2? Which episode was it? Anyway, I don't think it was the Phantom Menace. Was it Phantom Menace? Yes, it was Phantom Menace. I take it back. So anyway, there's people who believe, and I actually am one of the people who believe this, that the survivors, right? What's next to France? Switzerland. The survivors went into Switzerland and then continued their banking operations. And it's one of the reasons why the Swiss until recently practice isolation. They're like, yo, we got betrayed. We're not fucking with anybody. We're just going to continue to do our banking. And that's what they did. Because if you look at the Knights Templars flag and you look at the flag of Switzerland, it's basically the inversion of that. Now, the story goes that they went there and the indigenous people of Switzerland were having, they were being attacked, or they were having conflict with another group that was trying to come into the region, and that a bunch of freaking, sheep herders and farmers and whatnot were able to thwart off, this other group that was trying to come into the region. And it's like, okay, well, where did they get the battle skills to do that? And the idea is that the Knights Templar, who were warriors, who went through and did the Crusades and fought in the Middle East, after they were betrayed by, I believe it was King Philip, they, moved into that region. And I mean, it actually would make a good movie, but it's like, I think there's been a couple movies that have that, where you get this warrior and it's like, well, what are we going to do? And it's like, we're going to fight, right? They even did that with Ip Man in I think it was like Ip Man 2 or 3 or whatever. What are we going to do? We're going to fight. I will teach you how to fight. And then he teaches them how to fight. And then they have this climactic fight scene at the end of the movie, and then, they win and whatnot. And so, again, look at the Knights Templars flag and then look at the Swiss flag. It's just the inversion of it. So I always think that, that's basically what happened to the Knights Templar. They didn't go away. They just transformed themselves. But anyway, moving on. The origin point here, as for so much modern right-wing terror, may seem to be the 2011 massacre in Norway, and specifically the Neo-Templar Screed. What is Screed? I don't know what Screed is. What's Screed? Screed? Screed. A long speech or piece of writing. Okay, so let's just call that a manifesto. The murderer released to justify his actions. And that was the Breivik guy that freaking killed 77 people on that island, killed a bunch of campers and shit like that. Like, and what's so funny? They don't talk about that. You notice that, like, that just went away. I'm like, how you kill 77 people? And they don't really talk about, like, what really happened, how that shit went down. You know what I mean? A bunch of kids on the island. That shit had to be terrifying. But anyway, and this has a picture of the crowd at the Capitol carried Trump campaign flags alongside Gadsden and Knights of the Templar flags. Gadsden, I don't know how to say that word. Courtesy of Andrew. That's the the photographer. But the roots of this appropriation of medieval holy war go deeper, with the bridge from medieval to modern age being construed by the 19th and 20th century scholarship. Medieval Christian holy war was developed at a time in service to European colonialism to justify current occupations and explain ongoing conflicts between European powers in North Africa and the Middle East. In this telling, a racially and religiously pure West had to defend itself from a racially and religiously barbarous Islam. Those wars may have failed, but they saved Europe and began a clash of civilizations that continues to this day. Contemporary scholarship, often unconsciously but sometimes maliciously, repeats some of these claims even into our own day of homogenous West defending itself from an invader. And this is the foundation upon which white supremacists now base their claims. Yes, they freely use memes and draw on gaming culture for some of their information, but they also read books. Their history is a mismatch of tropes, telescoping different historical moments, as the point for the far right isn't historical accuracy. White supremacists use the Crusades as a time when strong white men were supposedly justified in using violence against a racial and or religious other, and they find a ally in that rhetoric with the Trumps. Also, 2 years ago, Mary Rabaran and I wrote about why getting medieval history right matters. Part of it is about honesty to the past. None of the white supremacist understandings of the Vikings or Crusades are accurate, even if they find roots in some academic work. But pointing out factual inaccuracies will never be enough. In late 2016, Sierra Lamuto warned medievalists to think about the ethics of how they teach and write about their period. It's not our job to simply give our students information. Instead, we have to help them discern amongst all the information, giving them all we know about a historical period, but then making sure they understand why it matters, how that information is being used in the present. Here we go with this. They're talking about, thinking critically and critically analyzing what you're being taught, not just grabbing shit and running with it. But unfortunately, that's always has to be done because so many people are freaking stupid and just running around looking for bias confirmation. We got a lot of stupid people in this world. How that information is being used in the present. It's our job as historians to remind our audiences of hard truths, that it's always more complicated than that, even if those are lessons people might not want to hear. That was a fairly well-written article. Somebody else wrote a comment. They said, I appreciated this fine essay. One of my thoughts was about Mark Twain, who had quite a bit to say that is relevant, particularly to the effort to combine the Confederacy with medieval themes. Remember a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, for example. Moreover, in one of his novels, Tom Sawyer talks about the glory of the Crusades, thus mocking Southern interest in the Dark Ages. Ben Beatty Rutgers, hold on, I'm guessing it's a fellow colleague or somebody, another Scott person. Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. Okay, so that's pretty much all I got for you. I hope that, summed up some things and about this ridiculousness of this, all this nonsense that we've been seeing. Vikings, man, it's so funny because I remember when I was fooling with a sister, right? And you know how the black man's supposed to be the man dingo with the 10-inch cock, right? And I remember she was trying to make me jealous, and she was like, and I was with a white guy, and I'll have you know that he had a Viking dick. That's what she said, black woman. He had a Viking dick. I was like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? Like, I'm supposed to feel some type of way now? Like, I'm supposed to be like, oh yeah? How dare you counter my man dingo-ness? You know what I mean? I mean, just nonsense. So Vikings are the desired face of white hyper masculinity, and either thugs or the black mandingo Zulu warrior is the face of black male hyper masculinity. I mean, it's just nonsense. Just nonsense. You know what I mean? I judge masculinity based on whether you actually do and operate masculine, in a masculine manner. Do you work out? Do you lift weights? You know what I'm saying? Can somebody look at you and tell, like, hey man, I ain't messing with that dude. You can tell he got high levels of testosterone because he's putting in that work. You know what I mean? Or do you engage in concepts of self-defense? I know the women don't want to hear it, but I'm like, if you in America, you got the ability to own a firearm to be able to protect yourself from anybody, and you don't engage in that, don't come over to me talking about my masculinity. You know what I'm saying? If you're not ready to, if a fight were to unfold, you're not prepared, for it in that moment. Like, don't come over to me talking to me about, your masculinity if you're not prepared for shit to go down. Men are always supposed to be prepared for shit to go down. You know what I mean? But that's how I judge people's masculinity. I see, like I told you, a lot of these guys, you'll see these militia guys and all these white guys with all their stupid ideas of masculinity. You got freaking running around in the woods with plate carriers with their fucking stomachs spilling out from underneath their plate carrier. You ever see these guys? Like, take a good look when you see these guys on the Storm the Capitol shit and, all of their type of far right shit. They're out of shape. They're too old. It reminds me of the guys that are always talking about, how much they're going to blow a chick's back out and shit like that, and they can't even get up a flight of steps without being out of breath. I'm like, what are you beating up? You know what I mean? You see that in healthcare. You see a bunch of guys, they got all type of erectile dysfunction. They don't want anybody to know about it. They got to get their Viagra, a.k.a. sildenafil. They got to get their Viagra. And I mean, I've seen everything from Viagra to fucking penis pumps. I mean, it's just I'm like, but you're a masculine dude, but you can't even get it up or maintain it because you either have diabetes and peripheral neuropathy, or you have some cardiovascular issue that prevents you from basically getting and maintaining an erection. You know what I mean? Like, their health is not in order, but they just want to skip to, what do you want to call it? They want to skip to, sleeping with women. But I'm like, you don't even have the stamina to have sex. But, oh man, I'm going to beat it up. It's just like this shit with the Iranian Hulk going up against, what's that guy's name? The Ford dude, who's like the scariest white dude in the world. Now that's a masculine white dude. But what I'm talking about, the bald white guy. He looking like I think that's another actor, but he looks like the other dude that was in, or maybe that was him. In Troy. Is there no one else? The dude that Brad Pitt like totally demolished in that scene. I don't know if that was him or that's somebody who looks like him. I think there's another actor. It's a different actor. Those are two different actors. I could be wrong. I don't think they're the same actor, but they could be the same actor. But I know his last name is Ford. He's British, and they just had this. The Iranian Hulk, who obviously was using photoshopped images of himself to make himself look better. He doesn't have the height, and I mean the Ford dude just demolished him. He just pushed him on the ground. You know what I mean? And then the Iranian Hulk tried to make some weak attempt to try to take him down. Like, it's like, yeah, man, you were talking mad shit online. You ain't ready for this. Like, this is a total mismatch. They should just call the whole thing off because it is a total and utter absolute mismatch. It's insane. But yeah, go look that up. The Ford dude versus the Iranian Hulk. What's his name? Something Ford. Starts with an M. I forget what his name is, but yeah, I mean, that's an intimidating looking white dude. Even I'll admit that. I'm like, yeah, there's your Viking shit right there. But how many white guys are putting in that type of work? They're not putting in that type of work. You know what I mean? They drinking beer and not exercising, not training, talking about fucking somebody else. There's so many people out here who are like that talk shit. You know what I mean? Ain't been a fight in their life. And you see it. You see it like, they scared to take a hit. You know, like when somebody's a warrior, they go all in. They're not afraid to take a hit. You know what I mean? But when somebody's sitting there and they throw a punch and then they like, dodge back like 10 feet, like, nah, you afraid to get hit. Warriors aren't afraid to get hit. They're like, as soon as I get near you and I get close enough to grab your ass, I'm not letting go, and I'm doing as much damage as I can in the next, 5 seconds. You can tell how whether somebody can fight or not just based off of that. I'm like, oh shit, he went all in. Nah. You weren't ready for that. But anyway, that's all I gotta say. That's my video. SWP out. We was Vikangz. It should be we were, because they probably wouldn't say was. We were Vikangz. Anyway, that's my video. SWP out.